And I would immediately pass now the floor for us to start this event to our director, Jorge Moreira da Silva, the DCD director, the Development Cooperation Director at the OECD. George, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and I would like to start by thanking the presence of all participants, but especially thanking the presence of His Excellency Bandar Al-Ajjar, President of Islamic Development Bank, and also Ms. Susanna Moorhead, the chair of the OECD Development Assistance Committee. This event is an important moment to present the OECD Islamic Finance Report on Arab, Islamic and DAC donors collaborate through Islamic finance tools and concepts. This report is the first of this kind, so today is an exciting discussion. We will start with two speeches from our keynote speakers, and then we'll have a rich panel for today's webinar, including the CEO of Responsible Finance and Investment Foundation, Mr. Blake Road, the Director General of Islamic Research and Training Institute, Dr. Sami Swailem, and Dr. Tika Arondina, Director of Islamic Economics Program at the Faculty of Economics and Business Universities of Indonesia. Before giving the floor to our speakers, I would like to share the main messages from this report. As I said, this is the first time that OECD has taken a deeper look at the state of Islamic finance tools and concepts. This is particularly important today as we have the opportunity to shape the COVID-19 response and recovery packages will look like in the midst of a deep economic crisis. This makes our collective goals on sustainable development and climate harder to reach, yet more important than ever. As discussed in our recent high-level ministerial meeting of the DAC, we will need all sources of finance to help us get through this period, protect the progress achieved towards SDGs, and join up forces for the decade of action. The OECD works, as you all know, to track the global financing for development landscape, and has recently launched its global outlook on financing for sustainable development. This outlook noted that the need to look at all forms of financing and mentions the potential of Islamic finance to do so. Why a focus on Islamic finance in this report that we are launching today? In 2018, Islamic finance was worth $2.5 trillion. And there are more and more studies pointing at the stability of this type of funding, as well as to the suitability in specific contexts. The report shows how the potential of Islamic finance looms large and is more needed than ever, not least because the current COVID-19 context, where many developing countries need stable, counter-cyclical funding sources, especially countries most in need, such as vulnerable and conflict-affected countries. The report also highlights potential actions to ensure that some of the most important development-related concepts and tools of Islamic finance can be better accounted for, on one hand, and can be the basis of solid Arab Islamic donor and DAC donorship partnerships. Some of the avenues are, for example, investing in raising awareness of these concepts and tools among DAC members, and on what SDGs are among the populations of Islamic majority countries. Developing standards and methods to count the development proportion of Islamic finance flows, such as using ODA and total official support for sustainable development measurement tool, TOTSD. Fostering partnerships that resolve around blending non-Islamic and Islamic finance, building on the good examples that are documented in the report, and with the emphasis placed on impact and achieving results for those most in it. I want to conclude these welcoming remarks by thanking again the President of Islamic Development Bank, the DAC Chair, and all the panelists for taking the time today for engaging in this agenda, because indeed we need to work together to foster better financing for better lives. And now I'd like to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Bandar Al-Ajar, the President of the Islamic Development Bank.
Your Excellency, you need to unmute the mic. Sorry for that.
Okay, sorry. Ms. Susanna Morhed, the chair of the OECD Development Assistance Committee, DAC, members of the OECD, DAC, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am delighted to be able to join you virtually today, and I would like to thank OECD and the DAC for their commitment to a strong partnership between the DAC and the Arab donors exemplified by today's event. The strategic dialogue between DAC and the Arab donors has significantly expanded over the past few years in terms of scope and depth. In this dialogue, Islamic finance inclusion is indeed a particular interest to the Islamic Development Bank for obvious reasons. We thank OECD and DAC for recognizing the growing importance of Islamic finance in the quest for development solutions and additional financial resources to achieve the SDGs by 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, the SDGs are big and bold, and to achieve them by 2030 will require a high degree of cooperation among all stakeholders, including finance providers, and a significant investment increase. Furthermore, ODA's ability to significantly crowd in private investment will be most critical to achieving the SDGs by increasing the available financing pool for different asset classes. Being asset-based and governed by the concept of risk sharing instead of a risk transfer, Islamic finance lends itself naturally to the business of asset creation that underpins the SDGs. Islamic finance can also be instrumental in achieving greater financial inclusion, especially in Muslim majority developing countries. Similarly, Islamic social finance through awqaf, zakat, and Muslim philanthropy in general could contribute to the development of human capital and improve social welfare and greater community cohesion. For example, while estimates vary considerably, Islamic giving and the third sector could be worth up to $50 billion annually. It is my firm belief that Muslims philanthropy can play a role in supporting efforts to achieve the SDGs. This is precisely the reason why the Islamic Development Bank and UNICEF recently joined forces to establish the Global Muslim Philanthropy Fund for Children. And I was pleased to note that OECD report on Islamic finance covered all three Islamic finance dimensions. The future will require that zakat, sadaqat using digital technology for better collection and distribution purposes, which will help increasing the access to such fund and unlocking the true potential of Islamic philanthropy. Issues about mismanagement, liquidity, transparency will be solved by using blockchain technology and solution for raising fund and administration purposes. And blockchain would help in terms of efficiency, transparency, and security. This is what we are really doing now. And when we help our member countries to face COVID-19, we launch a blockchain platform. And through that platform, we provide all our assistance. And this was, the platform was available also to all our partners and stakeholders. So everyone can see all the transaction there, and this helps us also in mobilizing resources. So we are now moving to using technology in very deep way, especially with regard to platform, and this might be discussed during the discussion. Making markets work for development is now at the heart of the bank's new strategic orientation, precisely to crowd in private sector for the SDG. The bank and other MDBs are gearing up to catalyze more private investment for development purposes, and this will mainly achieve through a more efficient and transparent allocation of risk, which fits neatly with Islamic finance very risk concept. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the growing climate crisis have sent us back to the drawing board. Both issues have forced us to completely rethink our economic development model and environmental stewardship role in the 21st century. The voices calling for a greener and climate-friendly post-COVID-19 result are growing loudly every day, and Islamic finance will not ignore this new reality. There is a growing movement within the Islamic financial services industry to adapt, enhance industry-wide socially and environmental safeguard, and this is indeed unavoidable because our Islamic values dictate this. The experience of DAC members in this particular area will be the most pertinent and most valuable. I am pleased to mention here that the Islamic Development Bank was the first supranational issuer of the Green Sukuk, with our debut Green Sukuk issued in November 2019 in Luxembourg under the Sustainability Finance Framework. And the Green Sukuk has raised €1 billion in 5-year trust certificate under ISTP $25 billion trust certificate issuance program. More recently, also ISTP issued the first sustainability sukuk for $1.5 billion listed on Nasdaq Dubai to support COVID-19 relief initiative. The capital raised to support the public health economic response to COVID-19 pandemic in 57 member countries. I would like also to mention that under the G20 presidency of Saudi Arabia, ISTP was selected as implementing partner of the Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion. Financial inclusion is indeed another area of mutual interest to DAC and the Arab donors. In October 2020, the ISTP group launched a $2 billion COVID guarantee facility to support private sector, especially SMEs, to mitigate the pandemic impact. The facility aims to support cross-border and domestic investment targeting vital industry. I believe pooling guarantee could be another area of mutual interest to DAC and the Arab donors in the future. ISTP also has been supporting Gavi, International Finance Facility for Immunization, a Sukuk program to front-load funding for Gavi's immunization program for children, strongly endorsed by DAC donors. I am pleased also that the United Kingdom in 2019 joined the ISTP Administrative Life and Livelihoods Fund with $2.5 billion lending facility launched in 2016 to address poverty and disease with the support of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. Ladies and gentlemen, in the past few minutes, I just could provide some points in response to these questions of this well-timed webinar. I wish you fruitful deliberation and look forward to strengthening cooperation with the OECD and our DAC partner. I thanks once again OECD and DAC for this discussion. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to the Chair of the OECD Development Assistance Committee, Ms. Susanna Moorhead.
Thank you, George, and thank you, Your Excellency, for such stimulating opening remarks. I'm going to be brief because we have a very distinguished panel, and I want to hear from them. But what I'd like to pick up on is this critical point you make about the need to rethink our economic development model. And I would actually argue, I think we need to rethink the entire development model, economic, political, social, the whole thing, if we are going to get through the immediate crisis of this pandemic, the health crisis, but if we're going to make sure that as we help partners recover, we build forward better and greener in a way that makes them more resilient and that responds to the climate crisis that you also alluded to. So I'm very encouraged by the extent to which the policy priorities of the Islamic Development Bank and those of many Development Assistance Committee members coincide. The second thing I wanted to say was, I mean, I find a lot of what you said really very encouraging. We are spending a huge amount of time concerned about how we can protect, maintain, even increase levels of official development assistance, and how we can use that to crowd in more private sector finance. But I think we have a lot to learn from you, and it would be great to compare notes, because the sorts of amounts you are talking about, I think 2.5 trillion in Islamic finance are really encouraging. That there are resources out there. That the challenge is, how do we harness those resources and funnel them into achieving the sustainable development goals in poor countries. And you mentioned a lot of very innovative instruments, which I would very much like to hear more of. So, I think often we feel at the moment that the demand for resources from developing countries is rising exponentially, and the supply is not keeping up. But I say I'm cautiously encouraged that there is scope to significantly raise resources in their entirety. The next point I wanted to make was just to reiterate the importance of the collaboration between the Islamic Development Bank and the Development Assistance Committee. I think I'm correct in saying that this partnership, this collaboration has been in existence since 1978. I know that your bank has recently signed a new memorandum of understanding with the OECD, and I see that as a green light for us to work more closely together. When our ministers met,
Susanna, you need to unmute.
You are muted.
Happened, but you were muted. Sorry.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened. I didn't touch anything. But just to say, when our ministers met last month at our high-level meeting, they recognized the need to work with all donors, not just DAC donors, and that was reflected in the communique. So we have a very clear signal from our ministers to reach out to you and others. Some of you may be aware that we should have held our overall DAC Arab dialogue in Brussels, hosted by the European Union last September. Sadly, this was postponed due to COVID, but I hope very much we can reschedule that as soon as possible in 2021. And, you know, to be honest, even if we can't meet in person, I still think it would be worth having a virtual conversation in the meantime. Let me just finally mention some areas where I think we can strengthen our collaboration. I've touched on different kinds of financial instruments. Your Excellency, you talked about technology and digitalization. And again, this is a real priority for DAC members, and several ministers raised it when we met. Our development cooperation report next year will focus on the impact of digitalization on development cooperation. So I think that would be a fruitful area to explore. I think we should spend time on the climate finance agenda. One of my priorities is to see how we can better coordinate climate finance and development cooperation. And I think if this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that this is an urgent crisis that we can no longer ignore. So we should really seize the opportunity on that. There's a huge amount of expertise that you have on informal instruments. And I was very interested to read about the use for refugees, for example, about how you're managing to target some of the most hard to reach populations. So again, I think our members would very much like to hear more about what you're doing in conflict and fragile affected states. And last but by no means least, I would just like to thank you for the way that your bank has mainstreamed gender throughout your programming, and to talk about, you know, how can we do more of that as partners and donors. DAC members prioritize this, but we are much better at prioritizing it as a policy than we are as delivering it on the ground. It is hugely challenging. So let me stop there. I'm very much in listening mode today. I think I don't know enough about Islamic finance, so I'm very keen to learn more. And look, we need all the new ideas, the new collaboration, the new partnerships we can find at this critical juncture for the world and the world's poor. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Susanna. And now we will have the panel discussion moderated by Ana Fernandez. So Ana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for such a good and inspiring starter for our event. I wanted to start by recognizing that the report was coordinated by Juan Quesada, which is a colleague in the DCD in my team, with a lot of inputs across colleagues from the Islamic Development Bank, from the OECD, from the DCD. So it's a comprehensive report with participation from a lot of colleagues, and I wanted to start by recognizing that. Before we open for the panel, I just wanted to highlight some insights from the report itself. Three key messages that we want to socialize with this report. One is that we really need to start to untap the potential of Islamic financing for development. We also need, for that to happen, to improve our knowledge on how these concepts and tools operate and how they can blend with the so-called conventional financing. And finally, we also need to do more in terms of partnerships between the DAC and Arab and Islamic donors to achieve that implementation. And why do we need to do that? As George and Susanna and Your Excellency mentioned, Islamic financing concerns 57 members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And it represents over 1.7 billion people. So that means that 1 in 5 people in the world are already benefiting from Islamic finance, and 1 in each 3 countries is also doing so. Islamic finance in Muslim majority contexts may be socially, culturally, and ethical more acceptable than relevant and then so-called traditional forms of financing. It can promote low systematic risks and sustainable financing systems, particularly important for developing countries that have been piling debt, and even more so now in the COVID context, when conversations around debt relief and moratoria have been multiplying. So the report also mentions this and highlights some venues for pursuing this discussion. Most Islamic finance remains contained within Islamic majority countries, but the report provides evidence of Islamic finance being used for development purposes. For example, being used by UNDP, Islamic financing tools in Gaza to promote entrepreneurship among young and women, and also extensive work of Islamic Development Bank in this area. Despite this potential, little is known about the extent of Islamic financing for development. We know that Arab and Muslim majority donors, such as Indonesia or Malaysia, make up the 2nd largest block of development cooperation providers worldwide after the DAC. Arab donors reporting to the OECD in particular disbursed 13 billion in ODA in 2018. But only a fraction of these is delivered through Islamic finance. And we also know that at the same time, Islamic finance is growing in some DAC members, such as the UK, USA, Germany, or Luxembourg. But again, there is limited awareness among development practitioners on what it is, what is being done, the philosophy underpinning it, and possible applications, including through lending. Further information on how much is being spent, by whom, in which countries, in which sectors would be very benefiting for our discussions going forward, and we stand committed to provide that space for sharing more information on data and on development practices and tools. Finally, I would like to make a call for our partnership here, and I'm sure we will hear more about the concepts and tools that have been developed around the world on Islamic finance. We have a very good set of panelists that will share their experience with us. We know that these partnerships are nascent, but we have examples and good examples already from Germany, from the EU, from the UK, the US, or Switzerland, and more can be scaled up and achieved to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 agenda moving forward. The report, and I will conclude here, outlines a number of venues to do this, to pursue this partnership and to learn more from each other, working with the Islamic Development Bank to understand these concepts and tools, and also in the context of the Arab DAC dialogue, as was mentioned, we can provide a good space for dialogue, including also by bringing the private sector and supporting partner countries understanding the benefits of the different tools of financing for development. I would now pass the floor to our panelists, and I will start by introducing Mr. Blake Good, CEO of the Responsible Finance and Investment Foundation. Blake has more than a decade of experience researching on Islamic finance and working in a compliance and investment officer role in the financing industry. And I would like him to address one question, which I think is quite relevant for our discussion today. Blake, in your view, what makes Islamic finance different than the so-called conventional forms of finance? How could governments and the private sector work together to leverage Islamic finance to maximize development impact? What is your views on this? And Blake, the floor is yours, and welcome to the debate.
Thank you. Was this the time for the 7 minutes that you had asked to prepare, or to that specific question? Sorry. Was this when you wanted to provide about 7 minutes to address that?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay.
You can address the question and do your intervention.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to join the distinguished panel, and congratulations to the OECD DAC on releasing the report. It was just launched. It's good to see a focus being put onto Islamic finance and the role for Islamic finance in development financing. As you said, I'm the CEO of the Responsible Finance and Investment Foundation, which is a nonprofit that aims to be a catalyst and enable financial sector development, incorporating the universal principles of responsible and Islamic finance. So a lot of our work is focused in the private sector, namely on Islamic banks, which account for about 3/4 of the nearly $3 trillion of Islamic finance assets today. The COVID era has raised society's need for them to make a contribution in improving social and environmental outcomes. And the way that they've done that traditionally has been through CSR, but also through zakat, which was mentioned at the outset. And those budgets are limited and constrained in the current environment that we see ourselves. So there needs to be other ways for them to contribute. So they make a contribution through zakat, CSR, to social, environmental, and economic outcomes across the countries where they operate. There are some Islamic banks that have joined initiatives such as the Principles for Responsible Banking to provide an increased contribution through their normal business operations, not just through their philanthropy efforts. And so some of that comes through the environmental, social, and governance field. Some of that comes through targeting specific social and environmental impact. But each of those is starting to help step up their activity. However, it's still at a nascent stage in a lot of institutions. It's not widespread across most institutions. It's not systematically done. So in times that we see now with the pandemic, resources and capacities for them to engage and support is stretched relative to what it was pre-pandemic and what it needs to be to achieve the objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals. And so I think we have to be creative and recognize that Islamic finance does have a unique contribution to play. And one of the most important ways, I think, is through the Islamic social finance that's been mentioned. But in order to engage private sector institutions, Islamic banks in these challenging times to meet the significant opportunity, we have to adapt Islamic social finance products to solve the acute crises we face now. They'll also be useful to meeting coming crises in the future, building upon what we're learning now in the COVID response. So I think today, the way that I see there being a role is using an example of Waqf, and specifically Waqf Sukuk, so an endowment-based capital markets instrument to try to address the blending issue, mobilize capital in a way that has a basis in the way that Islamic finance differs in its approach to conventional finance. So thinking through the early days of the pandemic, and even today, I've seen headlines recently, there have been shortages in important goods to respond to the COVID pandemic, personal protective equipment. And at the same time, there's been a surge in cases now. So there's demand for these products to address and overcome the supply chain disruptions that we've seen. But financial institutions, and Islamic financial institutions are no different, have been through a challenging 6 months in terms of responding to the pandemic, the payment moratoriums that they've been granting either voluntarily or through governments and regulators' encouragement or requirement. So as the impact of the pandemic on their underlying economic outlook becomes more challenging, they're not going to be able to to extend financing for these types of important investments the way that they would in the past. And as they see their impairments and their likely impairments rising, their risk appetite is likely to be further curtailed. So addressing opportunities, whether it's disrupted supply chains with new financing for new production, or supporting startups and SMEs through the pandemic period, is going to be harder for private sector institutions to do. And as we see promising vaccines providing hope for recovery next year, we have this gap now between when financing is needed and when the economic environment is going to recover. And so it's going to be difficult for the Islamic banks to meet that potential in the current conditions, which makes a need for new solutions more acute. So one option that a lot of countries have gone through is sort of the direct government support, but not every government's able to do so, and particularly when in many markets where Islamic finance operates, in many emerging markets, among those, they're facing challenging external debt situations at the government level. So they need other sources of funds to tap. One of those out of the Islamic finance assets are the liquid assets that are held, particularly those held as non-remunerated excess reserves at central banks. And there's certainly challenges in accessing those funds without creating additional problems. And there are regulatory requirements to make strict conditions on doing so. But that's where something where a Waqf Sukuk, so creating an endowment from temporary contribution from the banks, paired with either sovereign guarantee or a blended finance support from development funds, could help to mobilize funds in support of what's needed to respond to the pandemic, to support the economic recovery and resilience. And it's an area that would leave something specifically designed for public benefit at the end. And it's a tool that's been used a little bit recently. There's been a cash-linked Waqf Sukuk issued in Indonesia by the government. The Malaysian government's issued the Prihatin Sukuk in September, raising $150 million for COVID response. So these are some things where there's something unique in Islamic finance that's been used to support the recovery and response to COVID that I think has a lot of promise, and there's significant role in there for donors to provide assistance both through governments, as the Islamic Development Bank has been already doing, and also in other ways to support the engagement by the Islamic financial institutions in this process as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Blake, and thanks for trying to reply to a difficult question about how to do things moving forward by highlighting some of the challenges, but also opportunities that we have here in this area. And I would say that also for those of you that are less familiar with the tools and instruments, the report also explains well the difference between the different instruments and tools that are available under the Islamic finance context and framework. So I would move now to the next panelist, the next speaker, Dr. Sami Al-Sualem, Director General of Islamic Research and Training Institute. He was previously Deputy Director of this institute and the head of Financial Product Development Center. And before joining the institute in 2004, he managed the Research and Development Center of the Sharha Group and in Saudi Arabia. So we are very pleased to have you here. The ISDB is the largest provider of development cooperation that uses Islamic finance. So we would like to ask you the following question. What can be achieved through Islamic finance, and how can Arab, Islamic, and DAC donors collaborate to deliver development results using Islamic finance concept and tools? And which barriers and challenges do you see that we need to further expand our collaboration? So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Can you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you very much. First of all, I reiterate the appreciation of the interest of OECD in Islamic finance. I also note the remarkable efforts behind the reports. I think this is a very good opportunity to enhance and expand the collaboration, as you mentioned, between the Islamic Development Bank, between the OECD and DSC, as well as the Arab countries in the region. Let me point out in the beginning that, as mentioned in the report, there is no shortage of resources actually in terms of availability of these funds and of these resources. The issue, I think, is how to attract these resources, how to convince donors, contributors, and providers to participate in the development process in achieving sustainable development, clean energy, clean air, good climate conditions, and so on, clean energy, and so on. So I would also emphasize the point raised by Ms. Moorhead on the need to have new ideas that would have greater impact. So let me suggest one idea to consider, which is the following. Rather than trying to implement projects, which is good and useful, there is no question about this, let's move one step beyond that, and let's start establishing smart, sustainable cities. Many of our member countries, they have, as you know, issues of unemployment. There are youngsters who are educated, energetic, really willing to work hard, but there are issues of opportunities and so on. Same thing for donors and contributors and so on. So there are issues and challenges that would prevent the connection between the resources and the needs. So if we plan for establishing sustainable cities, let's say one city per country, we start with one member country and propose to have a smart, sustainable city. And then this city will be purely sustainable. So all activities, all economic activities of the city will be SDG compliant. So not only Sharia compliant from Islamic finance point of view, but also SDG compliant, at least in principle. I think this would help multiple objectives, and this will move us, will take us beyond policy recommendations that we are familiar with, but we are also noticing that these policy recommendations do not deliver at the end of the day something that, or according to what we are expecting. Now, obviously, the city should be economically feasible, which means should have reasonable resources that could sustain its operations and economy. And when we say smart city or smart sustainable city, it would respect the laws of the country, obviously, and the regulations. However, the bureaucracy or the administration of these laws and regulation would be drastically changed in order to make the city efficient, dynamic, and up to the expectations. Obviously, the regulations have to observe the SDGs so that the city has to be compliant with SDGs in all its activities. On top of that, the city should be able to issue its own SDG cryptocurrency, let's call it. This currency will be basically a way to monitor all the activities going on and to ensure that actually the resources that has been provided, whether by investors or contributors, are actually implemented as planned and as expected. Well, in as much as possible. Of course, it will not be 100% perfect, but at least we move one step. The currency can also offer flexibility in issuing fiat cryptocurrency beyond the hard currency available if the economy of the city would start growing beyond the available hard currency. So this is, I think, this is a way or a proposal that we might consider and think about in order to translate whatever good ideas, good proposals are on the table. But we have been, struggling all these years, how really to implement these ideas. I'm sure you share with us the issue of how to allocate the funds, who should be the beneficiaries, how to target those who need, those who don't. And these all are issues that, let alone the issues of, obviously, of administration, of local challenges and transaction costs. So we could, I think, in principle, plan for, I don't think it's a radical idea. I think someone must have thought about this before. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for proposals to the discussion. I'm happy to hear others to what you just highlighted to us. I think it's a good way of answering to the question about challenges and opportunities, and how can we really, in real terms, address the collaboration. So thank you very much for that, and happy to hear others during the debate on this. I'm now very pleased to also pass the next speaker, which is Dr. Tika Arondina. She's currently the director of the Islamic Economics program at the Faculty of Economics and Business of the University of the Universitas Indonesia, where she's also a senior research in the Center of Islamic Economics and Business. She also was appointed as Audit and Risk Committee in the bank, BTPNE CIA, and she has published several papers in international journals and received the Journal Excellency Award from the Pacific Basin Financing Journal on her work on Sukuk. There is one aspect that we have not been talking much about it, but it's a very important one. And it's about the social dimension of financing, of Islamic financing. And Indonesia is both a provider and recipient of development cooperation, and has been resorting to Islamic finance for a long time to promote development, both nationally and internationally. So Tika, if I may ask you, how can Islamic finance, in particular Islamic social finance instruments, support people and development? And do you see scope for using Islamic finance concepts and tools in the current context of the COVID crisis? And can you share the experience of Indonesia in doing so? So the floor is yours. Welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, Anna. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, can I just share the slide here? I have several slides to present. If the host can make me able to start the screen sharing.
Yes, I think we have not just doing that.
Mm-hmm. Firstly, I want to thank, for this opportunity. This is a very honorable opportunity for me. Thank you so much for inviting me, and from OECD, from IDB, from RFI, and also for you, Anna. Thank you so much. Okay, wow. Okay, now, okay, I can share it to you. Okay. All right. Can you see that? Right. Mhm.
We can see it.
All right, okay. Let me check several things. All right. So thank you so much. My title is on Islamic social finance and sustainable development. Okay, this more towards on Islamic social finance part rather than the finance itself. But before we going through, let me show you, the ecosystem, the Islamic ecosystem here. Okay. All right. So this is the Islamic ecosystems that is built, based on the part of Islamic economics and also finance. We have several pyramids here. Here is the Zakat, Infaq, and Waqaf institutions actually here are given to support the people who are in need. In fact, sorry, I cannot, I have to stop the sharing, I think, because I cannot move it. Maybe, is it okay if I give it like this? Okay.
If you want, you can send it to Najat and she will move it for you also.
Yes. Okay, I already sent it to Juan. Probably Juan receive it or not.
We can try to do that from our side, I suppose. But please continue if you want.
Okay, please. Okay, I will try to continue. Okay. So here we have in the bottom line a Zakat and Wakaf Foundations itself, or institution, which collects Zakat or Wakaf Infaq or voluntary charity and use it to serve people below the poverty line. If you can see here, we have a three instrument that the three instruments has a different characteristics. Zakat is an obligations of a Muslim. They can share the obligations of 2.5% of their wealth. And also the infaq here is actually a charitable for people who need that. And wakaf here is this is support for perpetuity investment. So in order that it's always growing. Now, below poverty line, people are having the access to this zakat, wakaf, and infaq. But above the poverty line, we have several people who are actually poor, not able to go to the bank, but they want to work. We have to serve them. So that's why the Islamic microfinance appear here. And also, for those people who are actually bankable, they can go to Islamic microbanking or Islamic fintech or Islamic banking or Islamic capital markets. So all the people actually can take parts in the economy regardless the economic conditions that they have. Now, in Indonesia, we have also implemented sustainable development goals. It's already adopted in the framework of the government in its plan and also in its strategies. The roadmap is given how to achieve 2030 planned and also translated into the action plan itself. And also for the financial sector part, the Financial Service Authority also issue a regulation and sustainable financing planning. So they have to make a planning for 4 years ahead, but they have to continue sending the report on sustainability report for every year. So this is showing the commitment of Indonesia to promote the SDGs. This is, we'll talk about the commercial finance. How about the Islamic social finance itself? Now, Islamic social finance, by nature, is already aligned with several social SDGs, already aligned with the goals of SDGs, as mentioned in the report. It's the use of zakat can be used for reduced poverty, to promote education, and also for economic growth, and also for promoting health. So by nature itself is already promotes the SDGs. And also Wakaf itself, the Wakaf, they try to contribute to social infrastructure and humanitarian and also development purposes. As we see, there are several SDGs here that is actually complement with the Wakaf itself. Now, in Indonesia, zakat and wakaf has contributed a lot, for the economy. Indonesia starting its national amil zakat or national zakat collection institution in 2001. And before that, zakat is given informal, so they can give to the mosque or they can give to the one who live that beside their house, for example. But when government try to promote or try to establish the institution formally, now it's becoming growing very fast. The first one, you see, of course, for several years, the growth is very fast, but now it's reaching to 12 trillion rupiah. Of course, it's rupiah, 12 trillion rupiah, or equal to $900 million. So, and then also this zakat collections, they try to make a worldwide, they make Indonesian wide. They try to build an office around Indonesia, all the 34th province and 514 districts, so that people are easy to access to the branch of the office. And not only that, they provide also the platform. So in order for them to reach the market deepening of the zakat itself. And also Indonesia tried to make a good governance of the zakat institutions. So they try to propose the zakat core principles in order for them to be more transparent and also to have a good quality of the governance. Now, also for the wakaf itself, wakaf also contributed a lot, but firstly, different with zakat. Wakaf previously is introduced as an asset. So we have 389,000 locations of wakaf land in Indonesia, which is actually 52,000 hectares. There's a lot of land and mainly used for religious purposes, infrastructure, if you can see here. So this needs operational costs, of course, and this is not productive. So the issue now is how to make this zakat and wakaf being productive. Now, they try to extend more how to make this productive by having a cash wakaf instead of asset of the wakaf, but cash wakaf. So the asset of the wakaf can be using the cash wakaf to operate daily. So this wakaf also used for several purposes, for example, for hospitals, for educations, for boarding school, and etc. Now, when COVID attacks Indonesia, this zakat and also wakaf plays an important role. So the number of the collections is also increasing. Previously is 1 year, this year about 12 trillions, now reaching 16 trillion. We know that economy have a downturn. Indonesia face a downturn in economy, but the contributions of the zakat and also the infaq is increasing, and they use it for health emergency and also for social economic emergency. For example, the health emergency, they have a health promotion, having an education, how to have a healthy life, and also giving a spray, disinfectant, and also for giving a corrective action such as an isolation room or PPE, for medics. And social economic emergency also taken into place. For example, the zakat is given for family logistic package. We know that people are not working, they give cash for work. So because, business is being down and they need money to operate. So that's why cash for work is coming here, because the bank somehow, they do not disburse the money anymore. And also existing programs there. Now, because the government feels that this zakat and wakaf is actually significant and it has a lot of potential in it. If they try to promote better and how to just, you know, make things productive. So the initiative is an integrations of commercial and social finance. As Blake mentioned earlier, we have a cash wakaf link sukuk. You know, this is I think this is the initiative from the government, how to link between the commercial and the social part, so that you know, the coupon of the sukuk itself, or sukuk is actually an Islamic bond. The coupon of the sukuk can be used for social purposes, and some of the coupon is used for reinvestment because it is a wakaf. So you are expecting them to grow, is for perpetuity. And also another one is a green sukuk. This is also very new. I think only Indonesia and Malaysia issues this green sukuk. But what is the difference? Indonesia has a sovereign green sukuk. Malaysia is a domestic and private green sukuk. And also the retail green sukuk. So retail green sukuk is for individual. The number is very small, so people can easily access. Even if we see from the report, majority of the investor are actually millennials. Yeah, so and they can also access easily because it's provided in like marketplace. You can see, you can buy it in the fintech, you can buy it in the bank. Yeah, so they provide it everywhere. I think these are a very good product or very good instruments, you know, to promote the sustainability also. So with this, I believe that social finance can contribute significantly to the economy, you know, within, especially within the integration between commercial and social. And also it can actually support the sustainable development. And this is an opportunity. We'll invite all the donors to participate in this mode of financing as also acts of humanitarians. I think I'll stop my presentations here. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Tika. Very interesting. And it's always good to bring experiences from the ground and evidence from the ground on where the impact is happening. So thank you very much for sharing all this knowledge with us, and also your ideas and views on the impact of these tools and instruments. So with no further delay, I would move to the last speaker of our presentation today. Last but not least, we have Mr. Alexandro Villa, Deputy Head of Unit in the unit responsible for international organizations and development dialogue with other donors at the Directorate General for International Cooperation and Development of the European Commission. Mr. Villa works as a civil servant in the European Commission since 1997, where he has served in different delegations of the European Union, such as in Uganda, Rwanda, and in Rome. And I wanted to ask you, Alexandro, the EU has been collaborating with Arab and Islamic donors for many years. What are the benefits of engaging with Arab and Islamic donors from an EU perspective? You know, how has this been helpful to achieve the development results? How could these partnerships be deepened and widened? And what is your experience in blending Islamic and non-Islamic finance for development? Can you share also your views on this? Thank you very much, and you have the floor, and welcome to the discussion.
Yes, thank you, Anna. I hope you can hear me well. And good afternoon to everyone. I'm very pleased to be here with you, and thanks also for inviting the EU in this very interesting discussion. It is clearly a timely conversation, because as we see, there is a lot that needs to be done, and if we want to achieve the SDGs, it's clear that the resources at disposal are probably there, but they are not sufficiently mobilized. So there is for us, it's clear that there is a need to try to connect the dot and to make sure that we manage to leverage each other. Now, the European Union has been, of course, in this period, the pandemic has clearly complicated the whole picture. And what we have seen is that from our side, while we recognize that this has brought an enormous challenges for all of us, but has also taken tremendous opportunities. So for the European Union is in a process of trying not to match in the best way these challenges and the opportunities. And as the chair of the OECD said before, we believe that this is also an extremely important moment to try to rethink at our economic and political and social model. So the work that the EU has been doing now and is doing is basically trying not to one side to address the current crisis, working in particular on better and stronger partnership, but also trying to look a bit ahead in a longer post-recovery, post-COVID recovery. Now, the aspect of the partnership, as I said, is extremely important for us, and we have been within the EU, but also outside, trying to address new form of partnership. And as at the EU level, for instance, we have joined forces much more effectively between the institution, the EU institution, the member states, and the financial European financial institution. And in this way, we have been able to leverage much more the resources within the EU, but also outside the European Union, coordinating an important support that we have been providing to partner countries of almost 37 billion euro in support to the COVID crisis. But as I was saying, the crisis is one part, but what we have been also trying to see is also how to work on this post-COVID recovery, which is a huge responsibility that we all have. And try not to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes that we have been doing before, and that we build a consensus on what we call a Green Deal and also our digital agenda. Now, within what the work we are doing in the EU has also a projection outside. And so we are also trying to promote what we call a global consensus on a global recovery initiative, where we try to ensure that there is a sustainable growth model that is green, that is digital, that's socially just and resilient. And where we try also to link the debt relief with investment for the sustainable development goals. Now, we are also in a very important phase of our work, because we are now finalizing our new financial framework that will define the next 7 years of expenditure within the EU, but also for the external dimension. And this in this new financial framework, we are also trying not to finalize new tools where we have we managed to have a better, let's say, a better mix of grant and loans compared to before, where we have a number of new instrument and experience on blending, but also on the use of guarantees. And of course, very important for us is also the budget support. The budget support is one of the tools that will be used more and more, and where we see that there is also an important potential for cooperation with other partners. One aspect that for us is also very important and should in a way facilitate the way in which partner countries will work on the SDGs is to promote what we call better financial strategies to implement the SDGs. And this that are called the Integrated National Financing Framework. In this way, the partner countries will have the opportunity now to have a better picture of all the different financings at disposal, and make sure now that the resources, the existing resources, are used in an appropriate way. The cooperation we had so far with Arab donors has been extremely productive, but we see that there is also still a lot that need to be learned, and a lot that need to be shared in terms of tools and experience, and also in a way also trying to make to spend more time in making the analysis of the challenges that we have in front of us. This is probably one of the key aspects, because once we have the possibility to look at the challenges together and making an upstream evaluation together, then we can mobilize all our tools in a coherent way. And there is clearly a strong potential to do much work together. We have a number of experiences so far of cooperation with the Arab donors and Arab financial institutions. Some of them have clearly set the basis for further cooperation, and definitely in order to continue working on this potential, we will have also to increase the strategic dialogue that we have with them as individual, but also as groups in the different constellation that we have. The next Arab-DAC dialogue that will be hosted in Brussels will definitely be one important component of this dialogue, that we look at the potential that we have, but also at the work that has been done so far. I will stop here, and I'm happy to answer to any further question. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandro. I think we had a good different perspectives from the different speakers, and a lot of call for action, for pragmatism, for dialogue, and for working together better and more. So with that, I would open the floor for questions or comments that you might have. So I'm looking to the chat here to see if there is anyone raising hands also at the same time. Participants, chat. Okay, I don't see any questions. I don't see any raised hands unless I'm contradicted by colleagues here. So I think you did all very comprehensive interventions. So let me go back to our panelists here and just ask, I have a question here. Okay, so I have a question from Juan. We saw an increase for Tika, Dr. Tika. We saw an increase in the amount of Islamic social finance over time. What do you think motivated this increase? And Tika, I give you the floor immediately.
Okay, thank you so much for the question, Juan. Okay, so before that, previously, the social finance or zakat and wakaf is given voluntarily from person to another one, without institutions there. So they just, because the distrust of people to the institutions probably is one of the issues. So they prefer to give it directly to the one who need that. But along with the literacy and also, the institutions becoming in a good governance, they give a transparency, they give easiness, they give a good access, then people try now move from giving to as a one person, but they prefer to have to pool in one institutions. And the literacy is very good. I mean, how to educate, because if we try to distribute from a national perspective, they can distribute it to the one who need it in all the countries, along all the countries. If you just probably the one who live in one area which has many populations, many people live there, and then the amount of fund will be so many, and they will be distributed among them only. But you know, there are many people who live outside and need more, for example. So that's why people are more understand that. So they pull it in one, and then the literacy become growing, and then the trust to the government also grows. And that's why the number of amount of social funds is also grown. And apart from that, also they have so many. I mean, they provide transparency on how many what programs they might have, and so people are willing now to take parts on that. I think that's one of the reasons why the Islamic social finance growing all the time in Indonesia.
Thank you, Tika, for that. I see also that Guillaume would like to come in and make a question. Guillaume?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Guillaume de Lalande. I work at DCD as a policy analyst, and I'm coordinating the initiative called Total Official Support for Sustainable Development, which you may have seen in the report. The idea is to we're working as the secretariat based at the Development Cooperation Directorate of the OECD for an international task force that has been developing this statistical measure that aims to capture all official support for sustainable development. My question would be directed to the panelists. I don't know, perhaps Blake or Ibutika. The question would be about data gaps. Where do you feel are the most important data gaps today in terms of Islamic finance? And what would be your advice or recommendations in terms of how we can fill these gaps? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guillaume. I would also raise the question that was addressed to Blake's intervention before giving the floor to him to answer that question, also Guillaume, and ask other panelists to come in. So there is a question in the chat to Blake's about what are the challenges to blend conventional and Islamic finance, if any, from your perspective? And then I have also José Roman from the EU that wanted to raise a question. So I would pick that question also and then give the floor to our panelists to answer. José, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much to speakers and colleague in Brussels also for their excellent presentation. As DAC member, and top here EU DAC member, I have several, let's say, short questions on the Islamic financing. And sorry if they may sound a bit naive, some experience, but I've been working with them, but I still have. First of all, there is an issue. If I understand well from the presentation made by the colleagues, countries, Islamic financing is basically a loan. Is basically awarded loans on a high concessional manner, if I understand well. And in recent times, it has been focusing a lot social projects in education, health, and others. Before, if I understand well, Islamic financing was also focusing a lot sectors like the rural development, water production, water conservation, in areas, geographical areas, very relevant for its geography for the Islamic development banks. I think this is a bit similar question has been made by another interlocutor. So what are the reasons of this increasing focusing of the Islamic development banks on the social projects? And since those are social interventions, are they made basically through microfinancing? And then second, what is the extension of grant instead of loans, of a grant modality that is awarded through this Islamic financing? I don't know if it's too complex or too long, but so sorry for that. I had many ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good to get questions also from the floor. I would start with Blake, because there was also questions from Guillaume addressed to you and from the chat from Nestor. And then I will give also the possibility for other speakers to come in and comment on the other issues that were raised now by Jose, our DAC delegate from the European Union. So Blake, over to you.
Okay, for the first question about the challenges of blending conventional Islamic finance, I think using the Islamic finance types doesn't provide any impediment. There's no impediment to conventional investors financing through Islamic finance. It does get a little more complicated where there's both conventional and Islamic financing that's being done side by side, but those have been done across a whole number of different contexts, from big commercial project finance all the way down to smaller interventions. I think on the data side, there's been on the commercial Islamic finance side, there's been a lot of good data that's come out in the State of the Global Islamic Economy report, which is the one I cited, about 2.9 trillion of Islamic finance assets as of 2019. On the social finance, I think I'd probably refer the data question over to Dr. Sami, because ERTI has done a lot in terms of surfacing information on Islamic social finance around the world.
Thank you, Blake. I would call now Dr. Sami to come in.
Thank you, Anna. The data on social finance is not updated as regularly as the commercial data, as you know, because banks are required to report quarterly and annually, while many of the activities in the social domain are handled by private or informal networks or organizations which are not subject to the same degree of transparency. So the data are a bit late, and they are already cited in the report of the OECD. Just want to highlight a point raised by Gulam. Did I pronounce your name properly? Is Islamic finance, or maybe, forgive me if I got confused, that Islamic finance is a kind of a concessionary loan. This is one aspect of Islamic finance, obviously. The essential aspect of Islamic finance is that it integrates finance with the real economy. So there is financing, there is credit financing, but this credit financing must be part of a transaction like trade, like production, like, construction and so on. Obviously, risk sharing is the premium mode of financing, but even in credit financing in Islamic finance, there is an element of risk sharing, which is in case the debtor is unable to pay, just like what happened during the pandemic, then the creditors are required to postpone or be patient or suspend the payment. So I would say the proposal by many G20 countries is Islamic in spirit, even though the statements and the declarations did not mention Islamic in any way. But it doesn't have to be named Islamic to be Islamic. It is Islamic in spirit and in principle. And that takes us to the point of, can we have Islamic and conventional side by side? Well, I think we all agree charity is charity. To help the poor is something global, universal motivation of all mankind to help the poor, to help the needy, to assist those who are in difficulties and so on. This is a universal motivation that we all share, and it is Islamic. It doesn't have to be labeled this way. I mean, we shouldn't give too much weight to the label. I think we should look more at substance rather than the form, in order to really share our mission and really make an impact. So I just want to highlight this point, that is moral or ethical or social finance is shared along with many civilizations, many faiths around the globe. So when we say Islamic, it is not only for Muslims or by Muslims. It is something more than that. It is universal, basically. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I call on Dr. Tika to also comment, and then I will move to Alexander.
Okay, thank you so much, Aina. I think the question on me about the data itself, the data gaps. Okay, yeah, the same with Dr. Samir Sulaim previously mentions that if it is for Islamic commercial finance or Islamic finance data, I think it's now becoming quite complete. But the problem is for social finance, or in this case, Islamic social finance data, because this is due to, I think, the lack of coordinations among the institutions. And also, the one institution try to gather the data by itself, and then the other institutions also doing the same. So you have several different data. Even when we talk about the potentials of zakat itself, it has several different opinion on that, about the potential itself. So one way is to gather the data and coordinations among the institutions. You can appoint it, the institutions who are actually touch the ground, they can gather the data, and then you can have it as one stop. Even Indonesia now promoting in 2021 the information system is called One Data Center. So hopefully by this, the data now is becoming one, and then and also we have a valid data, because the one who seek the data is the one who really being in touch with the sources itself. Okay, thank you, Aina.
Thank you very much. And I think that's useful for also clarifying part of the question that Guillaume was raising also. And Alexandra, over to you now. And I'm conscious of the time. We are almost on the limit of our slot here, but happy to hear from you also. And are you there, Alexandra?
Yes, thank you. Yes, maybe one comment on the data, because this is clearly very important for the discussion we are having, and there is clearly a gap in the data at disposal. Now, the European Union has been a promoter and a supporter of the TOSD framework, which I guess could definitely make a difference in tracking all the different resources that the Islamic finance is already mobilizing worldwide. Now, this collection of data can be done, as the previous speaker said, by each institution, but it can also be done at the country level through a mechanism where each country is responsible for taking the responsibility of looking at all the financing that are coming in and going out. So this is clearly one aspect that's need to be strengthened, and that is also why we believe that it's very important that all the Islamic finance actors can join fully all this conversation at global level, but also at local level, because that will promote a better understanding, but also a much more transparent way of quantifying and all the resources available. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I think we could now put our cameras on, so we finalize this event with faces and also a photo opportunity here to remind ourselves that this is just the first conversation of many conversations we need to have on this topic. I think I would like to thank also the DAC chair, our director of the DCD, and the president of the Islamic Development Bank to join us in this event that shows the importance of the topic and the willingness to work together and advance this dialogue on a pragmatic way, as it was recorded and remembered by and stressed by our speakers also, that we need to get the how right. And the content is the best way to do that. So I would like to thank all of you, our distinguished speakers, also for all the insights that you provide to us today, and we will continue to engage on this discussion with you for sure. I would like to thank again Juan Quezada, that you can see in the image, for coordinating this work, but also other colleagues like Nestor, Marisa, I hope she's also there. FSD colleagues that were this financing for sustainable development division. We need to avoid the jargons, because otherwise people don't understand what we are talking about. But the colleagues that work on financing also in the DCD, and also I think he's with us because at a certain moment I saw him, Yusman. I think you are there also, because Yusman was also very important in contributing to this work. He's now in the UK FSO, but he was also in the FID before. So thank you so much. And again, I would say this is just the starter of a good and long meal. And this is very important for you that know a little bit about Portuguese traditions. The meal is a fundamental place to an event to get trust going on. So thank you so much. And as you know, the report is available, and please let us know if you all received them. And if not, we will be a pleasure to share it with you. Thank you so much. And let's take the picture now. So please put your cameras on. And I think, Najat, we count on you to tell us when we should say bye-bye and keep safe, and when we should stop smiling.
Okay.
When should we say cheese?
So you can say cheese now.
Yes, Islamic finance and cheese. Very good. Thank you all. It was great to see you and to be with you during this discussion, and I hope we can continue this partnership. Thank you so much once again. Keep safe, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. Bye.